Today we have Piers Torday. Hi, Piers.
Hi everybody, hi Musa, great to be here. I write children's books, and the first book I wrote for children was this one here, called The Last Wild, which is a book I wrote in 2013, and it's about how a viral pandemic changes the world forever. So completely far-fetched, nonsensical stuff. And there's a whole series of those books. There's the Dark Wild and the Wild Beyond, and they're about climate change. Really, they're not really about. They're about viruses in as much as they're about climate change. And then I wrote a very different book called There May Be a Castle, which is a kind of what they call a standalone, a one-off book. And that's really a book about the imagination and the power of the imagination and the amazing feats it can help us achieve. It's quite a sad book, I have to warn anyone if they're going to read it. And after that, I tried to do something a little bit different. And that was in the year of Brexit and Donald Trump getting elected. Often when there's big changes, I don't know about you, but I find a lot of comfort in reading to try and help me make sense of things. And I've also written some plays. I adapted John Masefield's Box of Delights for the stage, and also Charles Dickens's Christmas Carol. And I've written some short stories. And I also teach writing, and I travel all over the world, when we could travel all over the world, talking to children about reading and writing. And that is me. That is what I do.
And I guess the first question to start off with is, with your books, I guess a common theme is animals, talking animals. Where did that start? How did that, what inspired that?
So, on the one hand, I've always loved animals. I grew up very lucky to grow up in the countryside, and we had pets, but also surrounded by lots of wildlife. I've always been fascinated by animals, and I think what fascinates me the most is you can look an animal in the eye, whether it's an elephant at the zoo or your own pet, and you look at that eye and you don't see a person behind that eye. There's a consciousness and imagination, but you don't know what it is, and we'll never really understand what animals think or think of us, if indeed they think anything of us at all, other than that they need us for food or whatever.
And you come from quite a writing background as well. Your dad was a writer as well. Your grandfather was a writer. Your mum owned a library. How was that? How was that growing up?
Well, it always sounds like I came from more of a writing background than I did. But my dad did. He wrote 8 books, but he didn't write them till he was in his 60s. So he wrote them when I was a sort of adult, which was amazing and wonderful. And it did give me the confidence to finally start writing. But growing up, I thought he was a businessman. And my mum owned a bookshop, but only when I was very little. But she has written all her life, non-fiction, journalism, that kind of thing. And my grandfather was a journalist, a racing journalist, and he wrote books as well. So it is true to say that I grew up in a house surrounded by books, and where I just thought it was a normal thing to do, to want to write and read. You could say normally, maybe it's a curse, but that is, I couldn't really escape it, I suppose. And I was very fortunate that when I did start writing my first book, I already had a father who was a writer, and I could ask for advice on writing books, on the publishing industry, all that kind of thing. But it's funny. I didn't grow up thinking I came from a literary background, but now looking back, I guess I sort of do. And I was trying to write to be the kind of creative one and rebel against being a businessman like my dad. But it turns out I was, in fact, only joining the family business. So there you go. That'll teach me.
So, would you say that your parents were a very heavy factor in terms of what you write? So I know you write, but in terms of what you write, would you say or was it more in your environment that was the determining factor?
I think when you write for children, that's all I can really speak about. I do think the books you read as a child that are so important. Look, I've even written a book this is a tribute to one of my favourite books as a child. So, and when I wrote The Last Wild, I was thinking back very much to books like The Animals of Farthingwood, which I loved as a kid, and Win in the Willow. So I think my parents are big factors in the sense that they put a lot of these books in front of me or let me have access to them. Or crucially, I remember my dad reading Win in the Willows to me at night at bedtime. And, I think I just, from a very young age, I fell in love with the idea of, going in a boat with a rat and a mole and a badger giving you a cup of tea in his...
I know this is normally a very hard question, but out of interest, which book would you say is your personal favourite?
So I would actually say my personal favourite is this one, There May Be a Castle. It was a difficult book to write. I wrote it the year after my dad died, and I was really processing a lot of grief and sadness. So it is quite a sad book. And I wanted to do something a bit different with a children's story, and exploring imagination and the power of the imagination. And it's not going to be everyone's cup of tea because it has got a very sad ending, an unconventionally sad ending for a children's book. But I'm just really proud of it because it's a book where I really set out to try and say something, and I think I managed to say it. And it's not often you can do that in books. Often books lead you in different directions, and you sort of go with that because that's where the characters want to go. But with this one, it's sort of just it all didn't arrive fully formed. It needed a lot of work, but it just sort of emerged really as I'd imagined and hoped. So this is a story about a little boy called Mouse. And Mouse is 11 years old, and he lives with his mum. Dad's no longer around, and his older sister Violet and his baby sister Esme. And every Christmas, this family does the same thing. They live in a village in the moors. So they live in a valley up in the north, and they get in their car and they drive to the moors, long winding road, to see Mouse's grandparents. And this Christmas Eve is no different. They set off, but as they set off to go to their grandparents' Christmas, it starts to snow, and it really starts to snow. In fact, it turns into a snowstorm. And this journey, which should have taken 45 minutes, ends up taking over an hour. And but even worse than that, they never make it to grandparents because they skid off the road. And when they skid off the road, the car rolls and rolls until it finally comes to a halt. And of course, you can imagine everyone in the car, Mouse, his baby sister, his older sister, absolutely terrified. And but luckily, no one seems to be hurt. And what had happened was that the reason the car went off the road is that Mouse was having a bit of an argument with his sisters, and he was playing with his pet dinosaur, a little toy dinosaur called Trek, short for Tyrannosaurus Rex. And baby Esme had wanted to give it to her. Violet had been reading her book. There'd been a fight. And during the fight, the Mouse had let go of Trex, the dinosaur, and it spun between the driver's seat and the passenger seat and hit his mum's hand on the steering wheel, and that's why the car had skidded and gone off the road. But now they've come to a stop, and Mouse looks around. It looks like in the middle of a snowy field at night, and you can see where Trex is, this robotic dinosaur, and it's lying just by the gear stick, and he reaches between the seats to pick up the dinosaur. But unfortunately, what Mouse doesn't realise is that they haven't stopped in the middle of a field. They've stopped at the top of a hill, balanced on a pile of freshly fallen snow. And the only thing keeping the car balanced is the extra weight of Trex, the dinosaur, at the front of the car. So when he picks his toy up, the car tips up and it starts to roll down a hill. And now this is frightening, and windows smash, the windscreen gets blown in, and then Mouse, because he'd unfastened his seatbelt to get the dinosaur, the car hits a bump, and Mouse sails out through the windscreen into the night air. And he wakes up, and he's all by himself. There's no car. There's no family. There's just a sheep licking his face. And his beloved toy horse, his other favourite toy, appears to have grown into an enormous warrior horse. So suddenly he's alone in the snowy field, not knowing what's happened. And his toy horse is there talking to him. The toy horse is called Nonky, by the way. "Wait a second," said Nonky casually, as if toy horses grew gigantic and talked every day of the week. "Do I know you? Do you follow me on Instagram?" "No," said Mouse. "You're my toy horse. No one follows their toys on Instagram." "Oh, well, if you're going to be like that," said Nonky, "I'll block you." "Don't block me, Nonky," stammered Mouse. "It's not my fault. It is a bit weird, though. For a start, you can talk. You're much bigger. You're on Instagram. And I didn't know you were a girl horse either." "Get over it," said Nonky, "and get on. We haven't got much time." And so Mouse gets on Nonky and starts riding around, not knowing why he's riding his toy horse, but he's going with it. And they go up and down. And then, "Nonky," said Mouse, gasping for breath, "can I ask you a question?" "You can try, little knight," said Nonky, "but I'm a horse, not a search engine." "There's something I don't get." In fact, right this second, there were many things Mouse didn't get, too many to count. But Nonky didn't sound very open to questions, so he thought he'd begin with one and see how he got on. "You know how you can talk?" "Yes," said Nonky, as if her patience was already being tested. "Well, how come that sheep can't talk?" Nonky sighed. She tilted her head round so the golden eye patch caught the moonlight and bared her heavy teeth. Suddenly, she didn't feel like his toy at all. She felt like something very big, very alive, and very tough. "This is not that kind of a story," she hissed. "What kind of story is it then? Are we in Narnia?" "Been there," said Nonky. "Got the t-shirt." Mouse tried to picture a horse in a Narnia t-shirt. "Is this a time travel story or perhaps a thingy in the continuum? Someone's been watching too much Doctor Who. A fairy kingdom? Does this look even one bit like the bottom of your garden? It isn't any of those kinds of stories." Mouse didn't understand. He knew from school that a story could either be adventure, suspense, mystery, horror, comedy, real life, fictional, diary, romance, war, historical, mythical, science fiction, and fantasy, or guinea pig. His friend Farouk had insisted he only wanted to write about his guinea pig Yoda, so the teacher had allowed guinea pig as a category. So this story had to be one of those, according to his English teacher, or it wasn't a proper story. Although it probably wasn't a guinea pig story. Nonky looked around them at the woods of the valleys, silent and dark. She looked at their tracks crisscrossing the blank white field in uneven lines. Finally, she gazed up at the endless galaxies above their heads. "This, little knight," said the horse quietly, "is the most exciting story you will ever be in. This is a story of peril, of quests, and a brave hero. It is a story of magic and wonder. There will be monsters, not to mention a king and a wizard or two. Prepare for fights, feasts, dancing and song. Strap on your armour and polish your shield. Blood may be spilt, battles will be won and lost, but with any luck, our enemy will be vanquished, because this, Mouse Mallory, is your story."
Last question to kind of close this off. I mean, of course, you've been very successful. Books all over the world. Multiple awards. I mean, UKLA award. You're a patron of reading in Liverpool. The list goes on and on, doesn't it? British Guardian's Fantasy Child Writer Award winner. I mean, it goes on and on and on. But what would you say? Because there's loads of things we see, the awards, the reviews, your books itself, the books itself. But there's certain things we don't see. And in terms of that, what is it? What would you say is the biggest thing you've learned? Writing books and the process of writing books and how it's affected your life in general. What would you say?
I think it is that, it's very kind of you to say all those lovely things, and I've been very fortunate and I'm very proud of what the books have been received. But you talk to any writer, myself included, and the journey is very uneven. It is often quite a lonely thing to do. As I said, you are kind of self-isolating most of the time. And I think what I've learned is that when you're writing a book, you have to step back a bit from yourself and all your worries and about your job, or is the book going to sell, or any of those things. Is it going to get nice reviews? And you have to step back and let your imagination take over. You have to let the characters and the story and the world take over.
Wow, that was wonderfully put. Thank you very much for that.